The email arrived at 4047 on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was elbow deep in a sink of bone broth at the restaurant. My pastry chef, Marisol, tapped my shoulder twice before I heard her over the exhaust hood. She held up my phone with a face I couldn't read. "It's from Cascade Title and Escrow," she said. Subject line says urgent. I dried my hands on my apron and took the phone. The thread had 11 messages on it, all from the past 40 minutes, and my name was on every single one of them. Most of them I'd never seen before. The most recent was from a woman named Janelle Ortiz, a senior closing coordinator, and the subject was RE, Westlake Heights Lot 14, cosigner discrepancy and income verification. I scrolled to the bottom and started reading from the original message, and as I read, the broth on the stove behind me started to scorch, and Marisol had to lunge for it because I was standing very still in the middle of the kitchen and I couldn't move. 8 years. That's how long the email chain stretched back. When I traced through the forwarded attachments, 8 years of my signature on documents I had glanced at and signed because my younger sister had pressed them under my nose at a Thanksgiving table, at a Christmas brunch, in the parking lot of a hospice in Bellingham where our mother was dying. 8 years of co-signing things I thought were small and finding out, in the bright fluorescent kitchen of the restaurant where I'd worked since I was 21, that they were not small at all. My name is Hadley. I'm a sous chef at a farm-to-table place in the Belltown neighborhood of Seattle, and I am 33 years old. And the morning my mother died, she made me promise I would look after my baby sister. My sister's name is Sienna. She is 29. She is the reason my hands look the way they do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where this really started, which was about a year before that email arrived. Sienna called me on a Sunday in March and told me she was engaged. I was happy for her. Her fiancé, Drew, was a guy I had met maybe 4 times in 2 years of them dating, and each time he had managed to look directly through me like I was a smudge on a window. He worked in something he called brand strategy, which as far as I could tell meant he posted pictures of himself in linen shirts on a beach in Tulum. He drove a leased Audi. He lived in a rental house in Magnolia his parents paid for. None of these were crimes. I was prepared to like him for Sienna's sake. The engagement ring was 4 carats. I asked her how he afforded it. She laughed at me like I'd asked something quaint and rural. "Hadley, oh my God, that's such a you question." A month later, she came to my apartment with a folder. Not a digital folder. A real, physical, accordion-style folder with pink tabs. She set it down on my coffee table and slid it across to me with both hands like it was a small religious object. "We found our forever home," she said. "And before you say anything, I know what it looks like. But Drew got a huge promotion last quarter and the bonus is wired in 2 stages, and the bank just needs a temporary cosigner because the second tranche of his bonus doesn't hit until after the closing date. It's a paperwork thing. It's literally a formality." I opened the folder. The house was in a development in Sammamish called Westlake Heights, and the lot they had picked out was 9,800 square feet, and the build was a 5-bedroom, 4.5-bath, custom modern farmhouse with what the rendering called a primary suite wellness wing. The price, with the upgrades and the lot premium, was $890,000. I closed the folder. "Sienna," I said, "I'm a sous chef. I make $72,000 a year. There is no version of me that the bank looks at and decides to lend $900,000 on. You own your condo outright," she said. I stared at her. The condo. Our mother's condo, the one Mom had paid off in the last decade of her life by working 2 jobs at the Boeing commissary, the one she had left to me with a handwritten note that said, "For the daughter who carried us." That condo, which I lived in, which was paid off, which was the only thing of any size I'd ever been given in my life. Sienna had not been left out of the will. Mom had left her $30,000 in cash. Sienna had spent it in 11 months on a trip to Greece, with a girl I'd never met before or since. "You want me to put the condo up as collateral?" I said. "As security," she corrected, in the tone of voice she'd picked up from Drew. "It's not the same thing. It's a security pledge, and it falls off the file the day Drew's second bonus tranche clears, which is 45 days after closing. It's 6 weeks, Hads. 6 weeks, and we get to start our family in a real house, and you get to be the auntie who saved the day." I did not say yes that night. I told her I needed to think. She left the folder on my coffee table, and I read every page of it 3 times after she went home. And then I called my friend Wes, who is a real estate paralegal, and read parts of it to him over the phone. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Hadley, this is not a cosign. This is a guarantee. You are putting your mother's home on the line for a couple who, on these stated incomes, cannot afford this house. Please do not do this. I told him she was my sister. I told him about the promise to our mother. I told him Dro's bonus would clear in 6 weeks. He listened to all of it. I am telling you as your friend and not your paralegal, he said. Do not do this. And if you do it anyway, I want you to keep every single piece of paper they give you and every single text message about money. Save them. Promise me. I promised him. And then I signed. The first 9 months were not the worst of it. The build took longer than they said it would, which is what happens with custom builds, and Sienna's calls about it became a kind of background noise in my life, like the neighbor who plays guitar through the wall. But the change orders started in the 3rd month. The first one was for the kitchen. Sienna wanted the imported Italian range, the one that cost the same as a used Honda. She called me crying because the builder needed a $10,000 deposit on the appliance package, and Drew's cash flow timing was off this month, and would I, just this once, cover it, and they'd pay me back the day his bonus hit. I covered it. The next one was for the windows, then the flooring, then a thing called a soaking tub experience that cost $14,000 and had Bluetooth. By month 7, I was $38,000 deep in upgrades on a house I did not own and would never live in. Every time, the same script. Cash flow timing, bonus delay, the promotion, the reorg, the temporary thing. In month 9, she called me about the pool. It just makes sense for resale, she said. Sammamish is a pool market. Drew's brand is going to need outdoor content space anyway, and an infinity edge is timeless. It's like classic. The builder said it'll only push closing by 3 weeks. The pool quote was $62,000. The deposit they needed was $20,000. I said no. It was the first time I had said no to anything, and I said it on a Tuesday night, on the phone, while I was sitting on my fire escape in Belltown with a glass of cheap red wine. I said I'd given them what I could give them. I said the pool was not in the original plan and I was not financing a pool. I said it kindly. I said it like I was apologizing. She was quiet for about 4 seconds, and then she said, "You know, Mom would be so disappointed in you." I did not say anything. She told you to take care of me. That was her dying wish. And the second I ask for one thing that's actually for our future, for our kids, for Drew's career, you turn into this. You turn into Dad. Our father left when I was 11, and Sienna was 7. He was an alcoholic with a temper, and he had been gone for over 20 years, and the last time I'd heard his voice was through a screen door when I was 16 and he wanted money. To be told I was turning into him by my sister on a Tuesday night about a swimming pool was the kind of sentence that does something specific to your chest. I hung up. I sat on the fire escape. I finished the wine. 2 days later, Drew sent me an email. Subject line, family meeting, please. It was 4 paragraphs, and it was the most articulate I had ever seen him be, and the gist of it was that Sienna was in tears, that they had begun to wonder if I had unresolved feelings about the condo and our mother's will, that maybe family therapy was something we should consider as a unit, but that in the meantime, the closing date was in 2 weeks, and the final walkthrough was scheduled for that Saturday, and they would love if I could come and bring my checkbook for the upgrade reconciliation, and we could all reset the energy. I went. I went because I had not seen the house, the actual physical house, in person, and I wanted to walk through the thing my mother's condo had been pledged to. I drove out to Sammamish on a Saturday morning in September. I wore my work jeans and a flannel because it was a construction site and I wasn't an idiot. When I pulled up, Sienna was standing in the driveway holding Drew's man purse over her shoulder. He was on his phone, walking the perimeter, gesturing at the roofline. Their builder, a tired-looking guy named Marcus, was waiting at the front door with a clipboard. The walkthrough was a punch list inspection. The framing was done, the rough plumbing and electrical were in, the windows were installed, the drywall was hung, but not yet finished. It was not the final walkthrough Drew had described in his email. There was no certificate of occupancy, there was no closing in 2 weeks. The closing date had been pushed by 90 days because of the change orders, and Marcus told me this in passing while we were standing in what would be the master bath, and Sienna's face did something when he said it. I stayed quiet through the whole tour. I asked Marcus polite questions about the framing, I complimented the trusses. When we got to the back of the lot, where there was a hole in the ground, the size of a small parking lot, Sienna swept her arm out across it like a game show host. "This is going to be the pool," she said. "We went ahead and broke ground on it last week. The builder said we could fold it into the final loan amount, right, Marcus?" Marcus looked at his clipboard. I said, "Sienna, I told you I wasn't paying for the pool." She laughed. "Hadley, we already broke ground. The deposit's already in. You can't, unbreak ground." "Who paid the deposit?" She glanced at Drew. Drew did not look up from his phone. "It was We floated it, she said. Out of the change order escrow you put in last month. It's fine. It all comes out in the wash at closing. I felt something in my chest go very still and very cold. You used the appliance escrow to pay for a pool deposit. It's all the same money, Hadley. Don't be weird about it. I turned around and started walking back toward the front of the house, toward my car, because I had a very strong feeling that if I stood in that yard one more minute, I was going to say something I could not take back. I made it about 20 feet. I heard her behind me, the crunch of construction gravel under her sandals. She had worn open-toed sandals to a construction site, which I think about sometimes. And then I heard her say my name, sharp, the way her mother used to say it. I turned. She was right behind me. She had something in her hand. It took me a second to register it was a piece of rebar. 1.5 feet of rusted construction rebar. She must have picked up from the pile by the garage. Her face was not a face I had seen before. It was something harder and stranger than I knew her to be capable of. Don't you walk away from me, she said. Don't you dare walk away from me right now. I held up my hands. I want to be clear about this. I held up my hands, palms out, the way you do with a dog you don't know. I said her name. I said, Sienna, put that down. She swung. I caught it on my hands, both hands. I caught a piece of rebar swung by my younger sister with my hands because my hands were what was between the rebar and my face, and that is what hands do when something is coming at your face. The first swing took a piece of skin off my left palm and broke something in my right ring finger that I could feel separate from itself. I went down on one knee in the gravel. She swung again. The second one caught the back of my left hand, and I heard a sound come out of my own mouth that I had never made before. Drew was standing about 15 feet away. I remember this very clearly. He was holding her purse. He was watching. He did not move. I don't know how many times she swung. The police report later said 3. The doctor said 4. I remember 2, and then I remember being on my side in the gravel, with my hands curled up against my chest, and a very quiet ringing in my ears. And I remember Marcus the builder yelling, and I remember Drew finally moving. Not toward me, but toward Sienna. And he grabbed her around the waist and pulled her back. And he said, and I will remember this for the rest of my life, he said, Babe, not here. There are cameras. There were cameras. The builder had motion-activated security cameras on the property because of theft from the lumber pile. They caught the entire thing in 4K from 2 angles. Drew put Sienna in his Audi. I watched him do it. I was lying in the gravel with my hands ruined, and I watched my little sister's fiancé put her in the passenger seat of his car and back out of the driveway and drive away. Marcus called 911. I stayed where I was because I couldn't push myself up without using my hands, and my hands were not working. The ambulance came. The cops came. Marcus gave them the camera footage on a thumb drive before they even asked. At the hospital, they put 11 stitches in my left palm and a splint on my right ring finger, which was broken in 2 places, and a soft cast on my left hand because there was a hairline fracture in the 4th metacarpal. The ER doctor was a woman about my age. When she finished wrapping the cast, she sat down on the rolling stool and looked at me for a long time. Are you going to be able to work? She asked. What do you do? I'm a sous chef, I said. She closed her eyes for a second. Okay, she said. Okay, she said. Okay, she said. We're going to get you a hand specialist referral. The metacarpal will heal. The ring finger might have permanent stiffness. The palm is going to scar. I want you to be honest with the specialist about your work because there are some things you need to know about grip strength recovery. I nodded. I sat there with my hands in my lap and I thought about my chef's knives, the set my mother had given me when I graduated culinary school, the 8-inch Guto I had used every single day for 10 years. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was awkward to get to it because of the cast. I worked it out and looked at the screen. It was Drew. The text said, "We need space. Sienna is processing a lot of trauma right now. Stay away from us. We will reach out when we're ready." I stared at the text. I read it 3 times. Then I typed back, with one thumb on my unbroken hand, exactly 1 word. Done. I left the hospital that night with a friend named Pilar, who was the bread baker at our restaurant and who came to get me without being asked because Marisol had called her. Pilar drove me to my condo. She slept on my couch. The next morning, before she left for the bakery, she made me coffee and held the mug for me while I drank it because I couldn't grip the handle. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands in their splints, and I used the speech-to-text feature on my phone to compose an email to Janelle Ortiz at Cascade Title and Escrow. The email said that I, Hadley, was formally and immediately revoking my consent to act as guarantor and security pledgor on the Westlake Heights Lot 14 transaction. The email said that I was attaching a copy of the police report from the previous day's incident, in which the primary borrower's fiancé had assaulted me with a deadly weapon in front of the secondary borrower, who had then driven her from the scene. The email said that I had spoken to my attorney that morning. I had not yet, but I would by lunchtime, and that any attempt to proceed with closing using my pledged collateral would be met with immediate legal action. I attached the police report. I attached photos of my hands. I attached the hospital discharge paperwork. And then, because Wes had taught me about the reply all function 8 years ago when I first started signing things, I added every single name that had ever appeared on the title chain. Janelle, her supervisor, the lender's underwriter, the lender's compliance officer, the builder, Marcus, the builder's office manager, the realtor's broker, Drew, Sienna. I hit send at 9:14 a.m. on a Sunday. By Monday at noon, the loan was dead. The underwriter pulled the file when she saw the police report. Without my collateral, the borrowers could not qualify on income. The earnest money, $41,000, which Drew had told Sienna was fully refundable, was, per the contract Wes walked me through that afternoon, non-refundable in the event of buyer-side default. The pool deposit, $20,000, was gone. The custom upgrades that had been ordered, the Italian range, the soaking tub, the wide plank European oak floors, had to be paid for by Drew and Sienna directly because they had been ordered against the loan that no longer existed. Marcus the builder was a kind man, but he was not a charity. I got my first call from Drew on Monday at 1:45 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. I got my second at 1:52, the third at 2008. By Tuesday morning, he had left 14 voicemails, and the tone had escalated from cajoling to pleading to threatening to pleading again. I saved them all. My attorney, a woman named Rockisle, whom Wes connected me to, told me to save everything. I saved everything. I saved everything. Sienna was arrested on Wednesday morning. The footage from the construction site cameras was unambiguous. She was charged with assault in the second degree, a Class B felony in Washington state because of the use of a weapon. Bail is set at $25,000. Drew did not post it. His parents did not post it. She sat in the King County Jail for 9 days before her cousin on her father's side put up the bond. Drew was not charged. I want to be honest about this. The prosecutor told me there was not a clean enough case for accessory. He had not struck me. He had pulled her away. The fact that he had driven her from the scene and left me bleeding was, the prosecutor said, morally indefensible but not legally chargeable as principal liability. I cried in her office. She handed me tissues. She said, I know. I'm sorry. So I did the other thing. I sued him. Civil suit. Negligent infliction of emotional distress, which my attorney explained was a long shot, and unjust enrichment, which she said was a very, very strong case. I had documentation of every dollar I had advanced for the build over the prior year, every change order escrow, every appliance deposit, every cash flow timing Venmo, $41,000 in advances, plus interest, plus my legal fees, plus the medical bills my insurance hadn't covered, plus the 8 months of partial wages I lost while I was rehabilitating my hands and could not work the line. I won most of it. We settled out of court 11 months later. The total recovery was just under $96,000. Drew did not have it. His parents wrote the check. I cashed it. Sienna took a plea. She got 18 months in the women's facility of Mission Creek and 3 years of supervised probation, with a no-contact order against me for a decade. Her engagement to Drew ended within the first 90 days of her sentence. He did not visit. He did not write. He moved to Austin 3 months after she went in and started posting pictures of himself in linen shirts on a beach in Tulum again. I worked on my hands for 14 months. The ring finger will never bend all the way. The scar across my left palm is the shape of a comma. I learned to grip my caduto in a slightly different way, and I am back on the line at the restaurant. Although I am the chef de cuisine now, because the chef who hired me when I was 21 finally retired and gave the kitchen to me last spring. The condo is still mine. I painted the bedroom the color my mother used to call ferry boat blue. The thing nobody warns you about when you grow up the older sister of someone who needs you is that the role can become a uniform you forget how to take off. I wore that uniform for 26 years. I wore it through my mother's last 6 months and through every Thanksgiving since, and through the marriage of a woman to a man who watched her hit me and then drove her away. I wore it because I had promised. Because Mom had asked. because in the worst moment of my mother's life, when she was 48 pounds and her hand was paper in mine, she had whispered to me to look after my baby sister, and I had said, "I will, Mama, I promise." I have thought about that promise a lot in the years since. I have thought about what my mother knew and didn't know about the person Sienna would become. I have thought about whether the promise meant what Sienna told me it meant: financial guarantee, infinite forgiveness, the obligation of the older sister to backstop every choice the younger one made, however reckless, forever, or whether it meant something simpler. I think now that what my mother meant was, don't forget her. Don't pretend she isn't yours. Don't let her go hungry or homeless or alone in the world. That is a promise I can keep. I can keep it from a distance. I can keep it without my hands. 2 months ago, Pilar and Marisol and Wes and Rachel and a few of the line cooks came over for dinner. I made cassoulet. It took me the whole afternoon, and at one point I had to stop and stretch my left hand for 10 minutes before I could keep chopping. Pilar took the knife from me and finished the carrots. Marisol put on a record. Wes had brought a bottle of something French and good. We sat around the table in the condo my mother left me, and we ate, and I looked around at them, and I thought, this is a family, not the one I was given, the one I built. I'm not going to tell you to cut your sister off. I'm not going to tell you that what I did was the right thing for everyone, because I don't know everyone's life. What I will tell you is this: a promise to a dying parent is not a blank check. It is not a contract that another person can fill in over the years in their own handwriting and hold you to. The people who love you do not swing rebar at you. The people who love you do not squint 15 feet away holding a purse. And if the person you promise to protect is the one hurting you, then the promise has to mean something different than what you thought it meant. It has to mean, I will keep myself safe enough to keep loving them from a distance. That's the one I'm keeping now. Hands and all. I think about cause and effect a lot now. The way one quiet decision in a kitchen, on a fire escape, in a parking lot, can travel forward through years of your life and become the thing that breaks your hands or saves them. When I signed those first papers for Sienna, I told myself it was love. I see now that it was fear. Fear of being the older sister who said no. Fear of breaking a promise to my mother that I had never actually understood. Fear, mostly, of finding out who I was if I stopped being useful to someone. The rebar in that gravel driveway didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of 8 years of small yeses that should have been small nos. It came out of every change order I covered without asking a question. Every cash flow timing Venmo I sent at midnight. Every time I let Drew look through me at a holiday table and told myself it was fine. Sienna learned, slowly and then all at once, that there was no edge to me. So the day I finally drew one, over a swimming pool, of all things, she swung at it with a piece of metal because she had never had to meet a real one before. That's the part that took me the longest to accept. Not that she did it. That I had spent years teaching her she could. I don't say this to take her crime onto myself. She made her own choices. Drew made his choices when he stood there holding her purse, and again when he put her in the Audi and drove away. The law eventually had something to say to both of them, in its own slow way. But I had to be honest with myself about my part, because if I wasn't, I would do it all over again, with the next person who needed something from me. Honesty about that turned out to be the hardest kind of strength I have ever had to find. It was harder than the 14 months of physical therapy. It was harder than the deposition. It was harder than walking back into my own kitchen and picking up a knife with a hand that no longer closed all the way. Strength, the real kind, is not about how much you can carry for someone else. It's about being clear-eyed enough to see when carrying them is killing you, and steady enough to set the weight down anyway, even when they scream that you're abandoning them. A promise made in a hospice room is sacred. It is not, however, a contract written by the person it was made about. My mother asked me to look after my sister. She did not ask me to mortgage her home for a man in a linen shirt. She did not ask me to let my hands be broken in a driveway. I had to grow up enough to tell the difference. And growing up at 33 in a soft cast on a Sunday morning at my kitchen table was its own kind of late. But late is not never. If you are the one holding everything together for someone who keeps adding stones, please hear me. Loving someone from a distance is still loving them. Saying no is not the opposite of family. And the hands you save by setting a boundary are the same hands you'll need later to feed the people who actually show up.